Thank you all for being here. I'm going to give my opening statement. Thank you, Janice. And I want to thank all for coming here to the second in a series of hearings of the Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade Subcommittee promoting our nation of builders. The focus of today's hearing is the health of our steel industry and how we can work together to overcome the challenges it faces. According to the American Iron and Steel Institute, steel manufacturing employs 161,900 individuals over 100 facilities nationwide, and the steel industry is indirectly responsible for over 1.1 million jobs in industries like transportation, construction, auto, and national security. The productivity of the steel industry is outstanding. Since the late 1880s, U.S. steel plants have seen a five-fold increase in productivity, producing 1 ton of finished steel in 10.2 man-hours in the early 1980s to an average of just over 2 man-hours in 2011. Today, the U.S. is the third largest producer of steel, producing over 86 million metric tons. And U.S. steel manufacturers do this while maintaining a strong commitment to workplace safety. Then that's a testament to a very highly skilled workforce. But today's hearing is about finding pathways to policies that will cut down regulatory and other barriers standing in the way of our U.S. steel manufacturers. Two things I'd like to know are, first, what can we do to make sure our U.S. steel producers can compete on a level playing field, not handicapped by outdated trade laws and not pitted against foreign companies that are unfairly subsidized? And second, what can we do to match workers with these good-paying jobs? If U.S. steel manufacturers cannot find the skilled workers they need, that's a double tragedy. Surplus steel from countries such as China and South Korea is flooding our markets with cheap products. This low-cost and sometimes low-quality steel being imported to the U.S. is being heavily subsidized by exporting nations through state sponsorship, export rebates, currency manipulation, and other schemes. This subcommittee's jurisdiction covers non-tariff trade policies, of course, and this is of great interest to us. But the main reason we're here today is to identify the obstacles facing the industry so we can improve the competitive environment of this vital industry. At this time, I'd like to yield to Marcia Blackburn.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank our chairman for calling this hearing today. We all know the vital nature of the steel industry to our economy here in the country. We've got 161,000 workers who are working in the steel economy. Some of those we find in Tennessee. Mr. Ferriola, who is the CEO of Nucor Steel, has 2 plants in Tennessee, one down in Memphis, where I have visited and had the opportunity to see firsthand the work they're doing. The other is up in Portland. So we welcome you and we thank you for the work you're doing. I will add that in the 11 steel industry facilities that are located in Tennessee, in the past couple of years we've seen 2,813 new jobs created. So we are pleased with that and that type growth in this sector. So welcome. We appreciate that. I yield back my time.
And at this time I'll recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my thanks to both panels and to Congressman Murphy as well as our distinguished guests from the steel industry. New Jersey has approximately 7,000 steel-supported jobs, and many of these are value-added, and one plant is affiliated with Nucor Corporation, which is testifying today. Even though the state is not a primary producer of steel, it is obviously a critical industry for every corner of the country. As we examine the vitality of manufacturing in the United States, we are looking in part at the way government at the federal level can help or hurt the industry. In past subcommittee hearings, we have been told that the current tax code is a driver of inefficiency and frequently uncertainty. Extending the R&D tax credit, simplifying the tax code, and lowering the federal tax rate are suggestions that come to mind. A high tax rate makes it all the more difficult for our domestic steel industry to compete in an already a difficult playing field where competitors are frequently subsidized in various ways by their home countries. Beside the tax issue, I welcome your testimony on a range of issues faced by our domestic steel industry, and I hope that you will find our subcommittee a willing partner in ways to encourage and support the manufacturing community and the steel industry. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Well done, Mr. Vice Chairman. At this time, recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Jankowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you said, this is the second hearing of the year and the second in a series on our series on manufacturing, critical sector of our economy. At the last hearing, a small steel company from my district, Block Steel, Joe Block, was here to talk about the industry and some of the challenges. I want to welcome those from the Chicago area, Ed Kraz, and from Allied Tube and Conduit Corporation, Mike Rehwinkel from I probably am destroying these names, I'm sorry if I am, Evraz Inc., North America, and Mike Rippey, President and CEO of Exceller Middle USA. And so I grew up in Chicago, and of course I know a lot about old steel on the southeast side of Chicago and northwestern Indiana. I'm sorry that Pete Viscoski wasn't able. He's managing a bill on the floor today, but I'm anxious to hear about new steel and what's going on right now. I am focused very much on having an educated workforce that can well serve your industry. Our universities and community colleges and high schools are beginning to really have collaborations with businesses to prepare students for long success in manufacturing, and a commitment to the national infrastructure. Without that, the American steel industry will suffer. The American Society of Civil Engineers reported this week that our national infrastructure is rated as a D+. I know that sounds bad. It's up from a D 4 years ago. While investments in our nation's infrastructure, including the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, made a 27-month transportation bill, have improved our transportation infrastructure, but a lot of work remains. And as times have changed, steel production has been able to become more energy efficient while simultaneously meeting the shifting demands of our consumers. Today, the effort to develop cleaner energy sources is heavily reliant on steel. Wind turbines are composed of almost 90% steel. Wind is one of the fastest growing energy sources in America, representing 35% of all newly installed capacity over the past five months. I know my colleagues have talked about the need for an equal playing field so our steel can compete competitively in the world, and I hope we'll talk about that as well. And in the interest of time, because I know we're going to have a vote before too very long, and getting to our witnesses is a top priority, let me yield back my time.
No, could you yield to Henry, and we'll just let him give his full statement?
He wants more time.
Yeah, because Chair recognizes Mr. Waxman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your holding this hearing on steel manufacturing, and I want to thank all the witnesses, including our colleague, Mr. Murphy, for being here today. The steel industry is important. In 2012, steelmakers in the U.S. produced 96 million tons of steel, the third most in the world. The steel industry employs 160,000 workers directly, and it supports many more jobs in related industries like construction, automotive assembly, and the production of machinery and equipment. The success of the domestic steel industry is closely tied to the health of the broad economy. When the country's economy is growing, we need steel to build new structures, new cars, and new machines. But when the economy contracts, as it did after the collapse of Wall Street in 2008, demand for steel plunges, and the U.S. steel industry suffers significant turmoil. Today, the steel industry's total output and capacity utilization are approaching levels historically consistent with stable industry-wide growth. After an unsteady 2012, some industry observers believe that gains in residential construction and the auto industry will make 2013 a good year for steel. To maximize growth in the long term, however, we must take several steps to support the U.S. steel industry and ensure it remains globally competitive. First, we must seize the opportunity to improve our nation's infrastructure. Targeted investments in transportation, water supply, public facilities, and our electric grid are needed and in some cases long overdue. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, 12% of the bridges in my home state of California are considered structurally deficient. These must be repaired, and now is the perfect time given how low interest rates are. Improved road, rail, and port infrastructure would lead to efficiencies throughout the steel supply chain, and demand for steel would surge as projects got underway. Second, we must prepare for an innovative future. This means providing incentives for research and development so that the U.S. steel industry can outcompete other nations. It also means ensuring that workers have the education and technical training they need to work in the highly automated steel mills of the future. Third, we must remain vigilant in the area of trade enforcement. Countries whose steel producers seek to access the U.S. market must keep their commitments under international trade law, not to distort the market in their favor. And we must impose anti-dumping sanctions and countervailing duties when warranted. I understand that steel production is an energy-intensive process, and that some witnesses today may speak against energy-related regulations, but we must remember that innovations that make our factories less polluting and our air and water cleaner are good for the environment, our communities, and the steel manufacturers. Through the hard work of improving energy efficiency and using cleaner energy, the U.S. steel industry has become more competitive, allowing it to continue to grow and thrive. We can have both a clean environment and a vibrant steel industry. I look forward to the testimony today to learn more about how we can accomplish these goals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our first panel. The chairs, chair and co-chair of the Steel Caucus in the House. Before introducing Mr. Murphy, I will also, his co-chair is on the floor. Mr. Vesklosky is running time on the CR, so he is not able to make it today, but I'm sure Mr. Murphy, you can share his views, and you will not get his 5 minutes, though. We recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, a passionate supporter of the steel industry, Mr. Murphy. You are recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank also my good friend Pete Vesklosky for his hard work and dedication to this. Together we lead the Steel Caucus, which is over 100 lawmakers from 30 states who work to keep steel strong. Usually we do these Steel Caucus hearings with just our members alone, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your subcommittee. American Steel supports 1.2 million jobs and adds $350 billion to our nation's economy and serves as the backbone, both literally and figuratively, of America's built environment, our national defense, and our economic strength. American steelmaking stands ready for resurgence, powered by plentiful fuel resources, new technologies, and the most efficient plants in the world. American steelmakers have tremendous advantages over their foreign competitors, but they need clarity and certainty here at home. New restrictions on the mining of coal and iron ore will make it costly for integrated steelmakers to operate the blast furnaces that produce coke and iron. Now, if someone has not paid attention during high school science, they may have missed this point. You cannot make steel without coal and other raw materials, and you cannot make steel in the United States without competitively priced coal, electricity, and shipping on rail, trucks, barges, and competitive and well-trained workforce. more than 151,000 structures in need of new steel. Now, steelmakers also face challenges beyond our shores from nations that consistently violate their obligations under international trade agreements. Our steelmakers can win this fight, but only if there are clear standards in place, giving them and the working men and women of this country a fair shot at competing and succeeding. In the March 12th issue of the Wall Street Journal, it reported that Chinese officials are increasingly worried that state-owned steelmakers are expanding capacity while losing money. Faced with these contradictory conditions and sluggish economy, Chinese steelmakers are dumping their excess product into our markets in clear violation of our international trade agreements. In the last year, imports from China have grown 34%. Across the industry, imports now account for a quarter of steel consumption, and the brightest segment of the steel market, oil country tubular goods, we are finding significant quantities of Chinese-made steel that has been purposefully mislabeled in order to avoid duties and detection by customs officials. American manufactured, like U.S. Steel's tubular plant in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, has been expanding to provide drill and transmission pipe for gas and oil deposits found in places like the Marcellus Shale in my congressional district. But now these facilities are scaling back because of the massive influx of cheap, government-subsidized foreign steel. Furthermore, steel from China, Japan, Korea, and several other countries is coming in at a significant price discount because their governments are engaged in illegal currency manipulation. Yesterday, I introduced the Currency Reform for Fair Trade Act, H.R. 1276, along with a group of bipartisan lawmakers to stop this practice. Foreign governments are illegally controlling currency markets in order to prop up their steel exporters, while our manufacturers suffer slowly and painfully. And now that China knows they can get away with manipulating currency, other nations like Japan and Korea are doing the same. It is a growing list, and it will continue to grow as long as other countries see a loophole big enough to sail a cargo ship through. This legislation will give the Department of Commerce and Treasury the necessary tools to build honest and fair trade regulations. America wouldn't tolerate this kind of behavior by domestic companies, so why do we tolerate it by foreign powers? Free trade doesn't have to be free for all, where only the naive abide by the rules. We want China and other countries to be honest trading partners, and we want them to know we are a welcome source, but not a welcome mat. Moving forward, our caucus will continue to pursue these issues to ensure American steel remains strong and vibrant for decades to come. And I thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today, and I will welcome any questions.
Your testimony is appreciated. We don't have time to ask you questions, though, because we want to talk to the people behind you.
I think
so I'll just catch you on the floor.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Schakowsky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a unanimous consent request to put the testimony of Congressman Pete Visclosky into the record.
Absolutely. So without objections, so ordered. So thank you, Mr. Murphy. Well done. Timing was great. At this time, I'd like to invite our panel up, and boy, I'll tell you, this is probably one of the most distinguished panels we can have. So this is impressive. So I'm just going to invite all of you up now. Joseph Carrabba, Chairman, President, and CEO of the Cliffs Natural Resources, currently Chair of the American Iron and Steel Institute. John Ferriola, CEO and President of Nucor Corporation, currently Chair of the Steel Manufacturers Association, and had the extremely positive, once-in-a-lifetime experience of spending 4 years in Norfolk, Nebraska, running the Nucor facility there. Richard Harshman, Chairman, President, and CEO of Allegheny Technologies, Inc., also represents the specialty steel industry of North America. Edward Karaz, Executive Vice President, Allied Tube and Conduit, currently Chair of the Committee on Pipe and Tube Imports. Mr. Mike Raywinkle, President and CEO of Evraz North America. Mike Rippey, President and CEO of Arcelor. I probably have that wrong. ArcelorMittal USA. And John Surma, Chairman and CEO of United States Steel. And then Ms. Yvette Pena Lopez, Deputy Director of the Blue-Green Alliance. As you know, the rules, 5 minutes. There's a little machine someplace that'll let you know your time. Just because we're going to have votes early in the day here, I'd appreciate it if you could stick to the 5 minutes as much as you can. And Mr. Caraba, I would appreciate it if you would start us. And just turn on your mic and pull it up to you.
There we go. Chairman Terry and Ranking Member Schakowsky and distinguished members of the subcommittee, good morning and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Joe Caraba and I am the Chairman, President, and CEO of Cliffs Natural Resources. As the current Chairman of the American Iron and Steel Institute, I wish to express sincere appreciation of your interest in the state of our domestic steel industry. In many respects, our industry is at a crossroads. We are an extremely efficient sector with a talented workforce, state-of-the-art technologies, and the ability to furnish products critical to the broader U.S. manufacturing economy. However, we also face significant challenges arising from a persistently sluggish economic recovery, the surge of unfairly traded steel imports, and an investment climate plagued by overly restrictive regulatory requirements and constant uncertainty in the areas of U.S. tax and fiscal policy. In a moment, I will speak further to specific policy challenges and opportunities, but first I would like to briefly highlight the economic contributions of this industry. The company that I lead, Cliffs Natural Resources, is the largest producer of iron ore in North America and a significant producer of metallurgical coal for steelmaking. As a supplier to the domestic steel industry, Cliffs is a prime example of how steel production in the United States provides economic benefits well beyond those generated by steel manufacturing alone. In a study commissioned by the American Iron and Steel Institute last year, Professor Timothy Constantine of the University of Wyoming found that each job in America's steel industry supports 7 jobs in the U.S. economy. The aggregate national impacts of steelmaking, however, does not come close to capturing the importance of our industry to specific communities and regions across the United States. A study recently released by the University of Minnesota Duluth found that iron ore mining contributes to more than $1.9 billion to Minnesota's economy, and mining represents 30% of the gross regional product of northeastern Minnesota. Many of your communities in your districts that share such a profound reliance on the steel industry, its suppliers, and the family-sustaining jobs supported by these businesses. Given the acute demand for more of these quality jobs, we are grateful for your focus on our industry, and we appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective on public policy matters that will help define the future of steelmaking in the United States. I would first like to address the importance of sensible energy and environmental regulatory policy. While the CEOs before you today represent different elements of a most diverse industry, we all share a reliance on cost-effective sources of energy. Many believe that newly discovered shale gas developments are the most remarkable source of economic growth and prosperity that any of us are likely to encounter in our lifetimes. However, despite the tremendous promise of this new domestic energy source, persistent permitting delays and an arcane environmental regulatory environment threaten to further degrade the status of the U.S. as the location of choice for all large capital and energy-intensive industries. Our permitting process is far too protracted, and we increasingly find that federal agencies are usurping the role of states that states should play in working with industry to innovate science-based solutions, working efficiently to reduce environmental impacts. In order for our industry to thrive, we need to responsibly develop our American resources while ensuring that U.S. regulatory requirements are as predictable and workable as they are protective and stringent. In addition to energy, our industry is also concerned with the need for adequate federal government investment in infrastructure. Just as iron ore mines and steel mills rely on efficient rail, road, and port infrastructure in our supply chains, so too is prosperity of the U.S. economy linked to the adequacy of our national infrastructure. Developing nations such as China are recognizing the importance of infrastructure with massive investments in their transportation networks. The United States can ill afford to fall further behind in this space. In 2013, Congress should begin developing options to ensure a long-term funding mechanism for the Highway Trust Fund, as well as pursue reauthorization of the Water Resource Development Act in order to rehabilitate or replace crumbling infrastructure and enhance global competitiveness in manufacturing. Lastly, I'd like to speak about the stake we all have in our outcome of corporate tax reform. As a capital-intensive industry facing intense competition in global markets, the American steel industry supports tax policies that will make U.S. firms more competitively globally. In order for tax reform to produce real economic growth and job creation, the tax code should not simply be changed to favor less capital-intensive sectors of the economy. Rather, the framework for rate reduction must be determined based on what it requires to ensure that all U.S. industries are more globally competitive. In short, achieving the lower overall statutory tax rate should not come at the expense of a higher effective tax rate for businesses and industries that most support capital investment, job growth, and value-added manufacturing. As industry leaders, we stand ready and willing to work with you on these and other priorities. Today's hearing is an important and encouraging step forward in the realization of the public policy environment that can allow our industry and the economy as a whole to thrive. Once again, I thank you for your time and the invitation to appear before you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferriola.
Good morning. On behalf of our 22,000 teammates, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today. My name is John Ferriola. I am President and CEO of Nucor Corporation. I am also Chairman of the Steel Manufacturing Association, and I serve on the board of the American Iron and Steel Institute. Nucor is the largest steel producer in the United States and also the largest recycler. Chairman Terry and members of the committee, I commend you for convening these hearings on America's manufacturing sector. Like you, we at Nucor believe a strong manufacturing base is essential to sustainable economic growth. For years, our company has emphasized the need for America to once again be a nation that makes, builds, and innovates. Despite the difficult economic conditions of the past 4 years, Nucor has continued to invest in our U.S.-based facilities. Our capital investments since the industry's last peak in 2008 through the end of 2012 totaled almost $7 billion. We are doing this in a down cycle to position ourselves to be stronger and more profitable when the economy recovers. This investment philosophy has driven tremendous returns for our investments and contributes to our position of strength. Our largest project currently is the construction of a $750 million direct reduced iron plant in Louisiana. Direct reduced iron is a key raw material we use in the steelmaking process, along with scrap steel. The project is employing over 600 construction workers and will create 150 full-time permanent manufacturing jobs with the average annual wage of $70,000. Bringing this technology back to the United States would not have been possible without an abundant and affordable supply of natural gas. That is why we at Nucor are urging decision makers to proceed with caution on the issue of LNG exports. We feel strongly that we should not export away a significant domestic competitive advantage. We have also made investments that will allow us to make products for higher-end markets, including automotive, heavy equipment, and energy. For example, we are investing $290 million to expand our capacity to make special bar quality steel at our mills in Norfolk, Nebraska, Darlington, South Carolina, and Memphis, Tennessee. We are investing another $115 million to expand production of hot-rolled sheet piling at our Nucor Yamato mill in Arkansas. And we recently completed a $110 million heat treating facility at our Hereford County, North Carolina plate mill that enables us to produce armored plate for military applications and high-end plate steel for the heavy machinery sector. I am particularly proud that we did not lay off a single teammate during the Great Recession. Nucor has a long tradition of growing stronger during downturns by investing in our teammates and mills and collaborating with our customers. However, a surge of steel imports that defies market fundamentals puts our ability to reap the benefits of these investments at risk. Last year, steel imports increased 17% from 2011 and a whopping 38% from 2010. 38% increase in imports in 24 months. Meanwhile, U.S. steel capacity utilization was only 72%. Imports were up in every major product area and from most major steel-producing nations. These import levels make no sense whatsoever when you consider the sluggish domestic economic recovery and the fact that American producers are among the lowest cost steel producers in the world. The U.S. enjoys marked advantages in practically every aspect of steelmaking, including access to capital, technology, and raw materials, relatively low energy costs, high labor productivity, will put the American worker up against any worker in the world, and proximity to the U.S. market. The reason we are seeing this import surge is that while America is a free market, many major steel-producing countries are not. Foreign governments interfere in the market through state-owned enterprises, import barriers, currency manipulation, raw material export restrictions, and subsidies that are in direct violation of international rules. India recently imposed new tariffs on hot-rolled coil and steel plate. Egypt has import restrictions on rebar. Brazil not only doubled its steel tariff, but is proposing export tax increases on scrap metal in order to discourage its export. And China, by far, is the worst offender. Its highly subsidized steel industry is government-owned and government-controlled, and its market remains heavily distorted and closed to outside competition. As a result of these trade barriers, the open U.S. market becomes a dumping ground for steel products from all over the world. This is where public policy becomes important. Global trade is governed by a set of rules. If our system of trade is going to work and be fair for all participants, we must use every tool at our disposal to enforce these rules.
Mr. Ferriello, if you can just go to the conclusion at this point.
We have a tremendous opportunity to revitalize the American manufacturing sector and strengthen our economy. If we have strong trade enforcement coupled with other policy areas discussed here today, infrastructure investment, regulatory certainty, domestic energy development, America can once again become a nation that makes, builds, and innovates. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krass. Before you start, we just got notice that the floor was moving faster than we thought, and we probably are not going to get all through, but we will come back. But we're going to keep going until we absolutely have to go to the floor. Mr. Krass.
Good morning, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and distinguished members of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade. My name is Ed Karaz. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sales at Allied Tube and Conduit and the Chairman on the Committee on Pipe Tube Imports. Allied Tube has 5 production facilities in the United States, and we employ nearly 1,000 workers at our headquarter facility in Harvey, Illinois. We permanently closed a facility in Morrisville, Pennsylvania early last year, which I'll discuss shortly. The CPTI that I represent has 42 member companies located in 30 states with approximately 35,000 workers. Like other segments of the industry, but probably worse, the U.S. pipe and tube industry has a major import problem. In 2012, we had a record 8.75 million tons of imports. In fact, imports increased by 1.7 million tons over 2011 and captured virtually the entire increase in U.S. consumption of pipe and tube in 2012. OCTG imports took more than half the market, and line pipe imports took more than 2/3 of the U.S. market. Korea alone shipped 2 million tons, and numerous other countries, including Vietnam, Turkey, India, Taiwan, and many Middle Eastern countries accounted for massive surges of imports into the U.S. markets. While 7 successful sets of trade cases caused direct imports of pipe and tube from China to fall from a record 3 million tons in 2008 to less than 200,000 tons last year, there has been significant evasion of these orders through transshipment and misclassification. For these reasons, we support the efforts of Congressman Billy Long and others in the House and Senate to pass the Enforce Act, which would provide U.S. Customs and Border Protection with necessary tools to end customs fraud and duty evasion. While direct imports from China have been curtailed, we believe that as much as half of pipe tube imports entering the United States are made with Chinese steel. According to the OECD, China had approximately 970 million tons of steel capacity and approximately 717 million tons of steel production in 2012. China exported 60 million tons, making it far and away the world leader in steel exports. The Chinese government subsidizes its steel industry for policy reasons and makes Chinese steel available to our foreign pipe and tube competitors at ridiculously low dumped and subsidized prices. We urge this committee to engage the administration in discussions to use World Trade Organization rules to address Chinese government subsidization of its steel industry. In 2012, both the galvanized steel wire industry and our circular welded pipe industry lost cases at the ITC, which found that despite significant market share losses, modest improvements in the industry as a result of increases in demand after the depth of the recession was cause for negative injury determinations. We believe the Commission failed to take into account the prescribed statutory obligation to analyze injury in the context of the business cycle. In particular, despite the fact that dumped and subsidized imports from India, Oman, UAE, and Vietnam doubled from 100,000 tons to 200,000 tons between 2009 and 2011, grabbing 5 additional points of market share in the U.S. market, the ITC found operating profit margins of 2%, with net losses of 2%, to be a sign of a healthy U.S. pipe industry. I was quite mystified that commissioners, at the hearing and in the written decision, did not understand the need for a manufacturing industry to earn its cost of capital. In addition, I was extremely troubled by the Commission's finding that our permanent closure of a mill in Morrisville, Pennsylvania, was not a sign of injury due to imports because our mill equipment was purchased for spare parts. There is something fundamentally wrong with our trade law system when ITC commissioners do not understand the need for an industry to earn a decent profit margin and don't understand the devastating impact of mill closures on industries, their workers, and the surrounding communities. As the 2 charts displayed demonstrate, the massive pipe and tube import surge of 2012, which has continued in 2013, has caused devastating reductions in U.S. production in 2013. We therefore urge Congress to persuade President Obama to appoint ITC commissioners that will vigorously enforce trade laws in accordance with U.S. statutes. We also urge you to hold oversight committee hearings to determine why the Commission is not properly enforcing the injury laws and to explore legislative changes that will make the intent of these laws even more explicit. There is no doubt in my mind that without action against massive subsidized Chinese overcapacity and without strong trade law enforcement, that our extremely competitive U.S. pipe and tube industry will largely disappear within the next decade. Since we are the second largest consumer of steel in the United States, that will also have a major and negative impact on the American steel industry. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. We urge the committee to take all the necessary steps to ensure that our industry can compete in a fair and free trade environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Mr. Harshman.
Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Allegheny Technologies Incorporated, thank you for inviting me to participate in this hearing. I'm appearing on behalf of the Specialty Steel Industry of North America, or SSINA, and my company. SSINA's member companies produce stainless steel, superalloys, high nickel materials, electrical steel, tool steels, and other high technology materials for critical applications. ATI is one of the largest and most diversified specialty metals producers in the world, with 2012 sales of over $5 billion. We have over 11,000 full-time employees, 85% of whom are located in the United States. At ATI, we use innovative technologies to offer growing global markets a wide range of specialty metal solutions. Our products include titanium and titanium alloys, nickel-based alloys and superalloys, zirconium, hafnium, and niobium, advanced powder alloys, stainless steel and specialty alloys, grain or electrical steel, and highly engineered forgings and castings. Sales to many of our domestic customers allow them to produce critical products such as commercial and military airplanes and jet engines, gas turbines, power transformers, oil and gas drilling and completions equipment, products used by global chemical processing industry, and advanced medical equipment. We are one of the few companies in the world which can produce a full lineup of specialty metals in such a wide variety of critical applications. We understand and believe that the ability to manufacture critical specialty metals for our key growth markets must remain a core competency of the United States, both from a national security and a sustainable economic growth perspective. First, I would like to comment on the current state of the specialty metals industry. As the U.S. economy slowly improves, so did demand for our products. The outlook for 2013 is for modest improvement. However, low-priced imports continue to take a substantial share of stainless steel market, and we're up 12% in 2012, with China and Mexico leading the way. I would also like to mention this is a significant year for our industry, which is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the creation of stainless steel, and we hope you can attend a reception on April 15th with an exhibit showing the history of stainless steel. The U.S. specialty metals industry is technologically advanced and competitive in the global economy. ATI, for example, exports about 26% of its U.S. production and sells U.S.-made products all over the world. In recent years, ATI has invested more than $3.7 billion in capital expenditures and strategic acquisitions, nearly all in our facilities located in the United States. Our most recent strategic investment is the construction of a state-of-the-art $1.2 billion ATI-funded hot rolling and processing facility in Brackenridge, Pennsylvania, which is currently scheduled for completion by the end of 2013. Why has ATI chosen to make these investments in the United States rather than in a foreign country? First, we are a proud U.S. company. Second, we believe that to ensure that we remain a technology leader in specialty metals, we need to co-locate our technology development resources with our core manufacturing capabilities. We believe the best way to achieve the vision to have the majority of our manufacturing capabilities in the U.S. so that we can be an innovative, high-quality, reliable, and cost-competitive supplier to our customers. However, as a primarily U.S.-based manufacturer, we must be able to compete on a level playing field with our foreign competitors, several of which are state-owned enterprises. A level playing field combined with our industry-leading innovation and advanced technology capabilities, our unsurpassed manufacturing capabilities, and the productivity and knowledge of our employees will ensure ATI remains a key contributor to the national security and the economic growth of the United States. We are optimistic about our ability to continue to grow and invest here in the U.S. However, I would like to raise several policy concerns which may affect our long-term competitiveness. ATI remains supportive of the Department of Energy's preliminary ruling regarding more stringent efficiency standards for distribution transformers. The proposed standards, issued after a lengthy negotiated rulemaking process, establish a well-balanced update to the existing standards. The proposal will result in a significant additional energy savings, it is environmentally responsible, and it maintains the domestic manufacturing base for core materials. We urge the Department of Energy to finalize the preliminary ruling expeditiously and without further change. It is critical that the U.S. retain strong trade laws to allow us to fight pervasive unfair trade practices of our foreign competitors, dumping, government subsidies, protected markets, state-owned enterprises. U.S. companies struggle to compete with government-owned and supported foreign companies which have easy or low access to capital or may not be required to make the same returns on investment required of a publicly traded U.S. company. Of particular concern, the government of China continues to subsidize its specialty metals producers by keeping currency valuations low. Here at home, we're concerned about a new targeted dumping methodology proposed by Commerce and USTR, which will severely weaken our anti-dumping laws. Additionally, we are concerned about the potential use of foreign trade zones to subvert existing tariffs. ATI is proud to produce materials critical to the national defense. No weapon, naval, or aerospace program could function without specialty metals. Congress recognized this more than 40 years ago with the Specialty Metals Amendment, and we encourage Congress to continue to support that. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have 6 minutes before we have to go to the floor and make our vote. So we're going to have one last witness, Mr. Surma, Mr. Rippey, and Ms. Pena-Lopez. We will wait till we get back. We will probably gavel and go. You are invited to our ante room, which actually has coffee. Mr. Raywinkle.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Mike Raywinkle, President and CEO of Everest North America. My company makes flat, long, and tubular steel for a variety of industries, including the energy sector, infrastructure like rail, bridges and roads, building construction, and we're very proud of the armor plate we develop for the U.S. military. We employ 4,500 people in the United States and Canada. Roughly half of the employees work in our Pueblo, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, and Claymont, Delaware operations. In the last 56 years, we've made more than 20,000 miles of pipe. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the future of steel manufacturing in this country. Today, I want to join my colleagues in painting a picture of what our industry needs to support the nearly 154,000 well-paying jobs we currently provide for American steel workers and to create new jobs for the future. Modern steel mills are highly technical operations that require billions of dollars in capital investments to demand a highly skilled labor force. After touring the Everett, Colorado mill, U.S. Senator Michael Bennet said, "I've got it. These are the middle-class jobs we are talking about in Washington, and this is the place that creates them." Steel companies in America are very responsible corporate citizens, strong stewards of the environment. In fact, Everest is the largest recycler in Colorado and Delaware. We make new steel products from scrap metal. Mr. Chairman, to be competitive in today's market, we need a reasonable and streamlined regulatory approval process for the construction and permitting of new facilities or modernization of existing ones. If we're going to create and maintain the jobs this country needs right now, the process should meet the letter and spirit of the law. The process should be timely and provide a high degree of certainty that once the requirements are met, the project will be able to proceed. It should be a proceeding that recognizes the scope of the project being considered. Currently, navigating the bureaucratic permitting process is extremely frustrating in terms of the time, scope, and uncertainty. It has become controlled by special interests that raise issues outside the purview of the process simply to delay an approval. To continue to have a healthy industry, regulations should be well defined, and we need to have a good working relationship with regulators to obtain the most efficient results. A case in point, the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. This project includes 550 miles of my pipe. It will provide a competitively priced, reliable North American supply option for Gulf Coast refinery. Its completion is important for several compelling public policy reasons. Pipelines are safe, efficient form of transportation for liquids and gases. The required regulations regarding Keystone construction, operation, and safety have been met. Yet ongoing delays, reviews, and questions alternative routing have delayed this particular project. These delays are undermining the goal of secure, stable energy supplies in our country. Permitting reviews should continue to be fact-based and focused on individual projects. Additional studies or secondary implication of production activities like refineries or supplementary pipelines should be evaluated independently of the appropriate government agencies. Approval timeframes must be reasonable. Keystone was approved by the Department of State and 11 cooperating agencies. It has been exceptionally comprehensive. There was rigorous environmental review and ample opportunity for public input and participation. In summary, the needs of the nation and special interests were both considered. The Keystone Pipeline was met all regulatory hurdles, and it should be allowed to proceed without further delay. Finally, I'd like to point out that it's North American products that meet the high-quality standards for steel products in general and this pipeline in particular. The economic boost the energy renaissance will provide in terms of increased production and jobs should be benefits enjoyed by North Americans, not foreign countries flooding us with subsidized and unfairly traded imports that may be of inferior quality. We in the steel industry will gladly meet or exceed all regulatory requirements, but we need our government support to ensure that once these requirements are met, we can get our U.S. steel workers back to make the products we need to rebuild and repair our nation's infrastructure and get our natural resources to market. Thank you for your time.
Perfectly done. I appreciate that. Members, we have a minute 3, but 288 of us have yet to vote. We will see you in a I'm good with that. We've gotten word that Janice is on her way, but we can go ahead and start. So, Mr. Surma, you are up.
Thank you very much, Chairman Terry and members of the subcommittee. I'd like to start by thanking you for devoting an entire hearing to the state of our steel industry. We have long recognized that our industry has a true champion in your distinguished colleague, Steel Caucus Chairman Murphy, who was just with us, and we appreciate the efforts he puts forth on the policy and political front to advance our industry's interests. Your willingness to hold today's hearing speaks volumes about Mr. Murphy's enthusiasm and persistence in promoting an industry that is important to the country, especially to his district where I live and his state where we are headquartered, and we employ nearly 6,000 people. Steel is a globalized industry that competes fiercely on cost and quality to win and keep markets. Too often, some of our biggest challenges come from counterproductive and costly government policy and regulation. The Energy and Commerce Committee knows these problems well, and we appreciate your efforts to conduct vigorous oversight of U.S. EPA regulations and guidance and to attempt to achieve a better cost-benefit analysis of individual rulemakings, as well as the cumulative cost of regulatory compliance. I'll spend my brief time this morning talking about America's natural gas success story and how it's affecting the steel industry and our company. Just a few short years ago, few could grasp the economic, social, and environmental potential that would be unleashed by the discovery and technological mastery of bringing America's shale resources to market in the form of oil and natural gas. Today, however, we read U.S. government reports projecting that the United States will be the largest energy producer in the world by 2020. As a result of this new supply source and our ability to extract it safely and economically, there's a renaissance underway in the manufacturing sector. It is propelled by the availability and competitive pricing of natural gas. Electric utilities, industrial users, including refiners, chemicals, steel, and the transportation sector, and households are all turning to natural gas as a clean and cost-effective energy source. United States Steel Corporation has been manufacturing high-quality steel products for more than 100 years. Since 1901, our products have included pipes and tubes for energy industry customers, and today we are the largest supplier of these products in North America. As the energy industry has increased its domestic exploration and production efforts, new markets have emerged for steel tubular products and services. The energy sector has been a rare, bright spot for us during a challenging period of economic recession and painfully slow growth in the rest of the economy. We built and invested in a new joint venture in Northern California to produce large-diameter spiral-welded pipe to serve pipeline and distribution customers. We're designing new grades of steel and new products, such as our Patriot and USS Liberty premium connections, to serve the exacting requirements of shale drilling and production. We're adding new capabilities at our operating facilities to serve our customers' growing and changing needs, including a new $100 million finishing facility in Lorain, Ohio, began operations in late 2011, created 100 new full-time jobs, and a refurbishment and reopening of McKeesport tubular operations just south of Pittsburgh. U.S. Steel is also one of the country's largest natural gas consumers. In fact, we consume all forms of energy, including natural gas, coal, coke, electricity, and biomass. To give you an idea of our natural gas use, in 2012, U.S. Steel used more than 130 million MMBTUs of natural gas across our North American facilities. So every $1 change on the NYMEX is over $100 million impact on our bottom line on an annual basis. The current competitive price situation has been very positive for our steel producing activities, where we use 6 MMBTUs per ton of steel shipped. Here in the U.S., those 6 MMBTUs cost us around $25. In Europe, where we also operate, those same 6 MMBTUs cost us close to $75. $25 here, $75 in Europe. That's called being competitive, and that's reality. We're as concerned as anybody about prices and volatility, but we also have great confidence in the ability of our domestic shale reserves and the energy industry to meet America's natural gas requirements if they are permitted to do so. Competitively priced natural gas has enabled us to enhance our industrial processes and technologies while improving our environmental performance along the way. As you know, natural gas emissions contain about half the greenhouse gases present in coal emissions. So every ton of coal we can replace with natural gas helps us to reduce our total emissions. One example is increased injection of natural gas to our blast furnaces in order to reduce our usage rates for coke, which we derive from coal, an important material in our iron-making process. We now have the ability to optimize the blend of fuels to attain the lowest carbon cost for each particular furnace, as well as to make adjustments to maintain that cost based on the changing relationship between coke, injection coal, and natural gas. Now, let me close my remarks with a couple of comments concerning the recent surge in imported steel products generally, which my distinguished colleagues have discussed, but specifically on pipe and tube imports. In 2010, the U.S. imported almost 2.3 million tons of oil country casing and tubular goods used in exploration and development of oil and natural gas. Last year, the U.S. imported over 3.4 million net tons of these high-tech, high-value-added products, an increase of more than 51% over a two-year period. Some foreign producers have been even more aggressive. Since 2010, casing and tubing imports from South Korea are up more than 58%. Imports from Taiwan are up more than 88%, and imports from Saudi Arabia are up more than 420%. Same story is true for many other pipe products. Now, even though last year featured a relatively strong market for OCTG, public pricing sources estimate that U.S. prices of casing and tubing fell by as much as $200 per net ton. Very disconcerting following large capital investments to serve the sector by our company and others. Let me just conclude by saying that the shale gas revolution holds great promise for American industry and workers. We believe the import surge problem calls for strong responses from all who believe that true market-based competition is the best pathway to prosperity. The time has come for a strong global consensus that winners and losers in the steel business should be determined by hard work, innovation, costs, and competition, not by market-distorting government programs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murphy wanted you to have more time to say nice things about him, but he wasn't here to hear your beginnings, so I'm going to have to deny that request. Mr. Rippey.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I am Mike Rippey, President and CEO of ArcelorMittal USA. On behalf of my company and its 20,000 U.S. employees, I want to thank you for holding these hearings on the future of American manufacturing. If I can leave you with only one thought today, it is this. The American steel industry, represented by those at this table, is simply not your grandfather's or even your father's steel industry. The industry represented here operates at the cutting edge of material science. It produces high-technology solutions for its customers. It does so with increasingly advanced, and I might add, expensive equipment, operated by a highly skilled and tech-savvy workforce. Its employees are better paid than almost any industrial worker in the world. In short, it provides great jobs for American workers and for our country. You have my full testimony, so I won't address all the issues raised in it. But there are two that I would like to highlight now, and I'm happy to answer questions on the others. First, let me address how we are supporting our auto customers. ArcelorMittal is the #1 worldwide supplier of automotive steels. 1 out of every 5 cars in the world is made of ArcelorMittal steel. So you can understand that we work hard every day to meet the ever-changing needs of our auto customers. Since the early 1900s, steel has been the standard material for car body construction. It's strong, moldable, and low cost. But customer expectations and government regulations, such as CAFE, have challenged automakers to increase safety, improve fuel economy, and reduce CO2 emissions, all at the same time, a huge challenge. I'm here today to tell you that the steel is meeting the challenge. When the Transportation Department and EPA first announced the goal of bringing the fleet to a corporate average fuel economy of 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025, there were those who proclaimed that this was simply game over for steel. We knew otherwise. So to demonstrate this, we obtained from EPA and NHTSA the very computer models used to assess fuel technology and set standards. These models show that weight reduction we can achieve with advanced steels, combined with powertrain improvements, can indeed get 54.5 miles per gallon. The models also show that steel gets the fleet 54.5 miles per gallon at a lower cost than other materials. We understand that part of the objective of this standard is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We urge the subcommittee to make sure that CAFE regulations measure the full impact of materials on the environment from cradle to grave or over the life cycle. Models show that steel gets the fleet 54.5 miles per gallon with a lower total life cycle carbon footprint than other materials that are significantly more energy and emissions intensive. We can achieve these incredible technological advances in automotive and many of our other product applications because of the innovation of our workforce, the hard-fought relative prosperity of the domestic steel industry, and our R&D initiatives. But that prosperity is threatened every day. That's why we need your help to transform America's vital manufacturing base and to ensure a secure job future for our workers. One of our highest priorities must be to identify, encourage, and train manufacturing workers in the future. In the next few years, because of retirements, we face having hundreds of job openings left unfilled, either because of today's young people have forgotten about manufacturing or because they lack the skills and work values we need. To address this shortage, ArcelorMittal initiated Steelworker for the Future in 2008, an associate degree program in partnership with great community colleges located near our plants. We work with local high schools to attract science and math-savvy students to this program, where they get classroom training at a reasonable cost. Then we offer them paid internships at our plants. Qualified graduates are offered full-time jobs when they finish this program. If they don't want to work for us, they still end up with a set of skills for a lifetime. These skills that will allow them to be valued by other manufacturing companies. I would urge the committee to look closely at private programs like Steelworker for the Future as a possible template for a national campaign to educate young people about the incredible possibilities that today's manufacturing industries offer. With thousands of great jobs going begging every year in manufacturing, it is time we made a national priority to value and train people who make things. Mr. Chairman, once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Peña-Lopez, appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Good morning. Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Yvette Peña-Lopez, Deputy Director of the Blue-Green Alliance. On behalf of my organization, our 14 national labor and environmental partners, and the estimated 15 million members and supporters they represent, I want to thank you for holding this hearing today. We appreciate the invitation to testify and are honored to join the other panelists from the Congressional Steel Caucus and the steel industry, in particular the CEOs of ArcelorMittal, Allegheny Technologies, and Evraz, who are each valued members of the Blue-Green Alliance's Corporate Advisory Council. The United Steelworkers and the Sierra Club founded the Blue-Green Alliance in 2006 and have since grown to incorporate 12 other labor and environmental organizations to create an alliance built with a wide variety of priorities and backgrounds. Our partners have come together to move America towards a 21st century clean economy, and manufacturing has consistently been a major focus of the alliance. The economic downturn in years of shifting manufacturing production took a significant toll on U.S. manufacturing and their workers. America has begun to change this, but much more needs to be done to bring these jobs back and ensure that American manufacturing and the steel industry in particular are drivers of America's 21st century clean economy. To achieve this rebirth, we must implement the following 5 drivers of American manufacturing. First, we must rebuild our nation's infrastructure. Investments in our infrastructure can yield tremendous benefits, including jobs and expanded demand in our domestic steel sector. 1 out of every 4 of the nation's bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. Nearly a quarter of the nation's bus and rail infrastructure is in marginal or poor condition. Across the country, 700,000 tons of steel plate is used annually in bridge and building construction projects. If a properly structured infrastructure program is implemented, job creation for the manufacturing sector could clear more than 250,000 new jobs. Second, we must deploy more industrial energy efficiency. Energy efficiency leverages productivity and power from resources that in many cases would otherwise literally vanish into thin air. When combined with smart policies aimed at minimizing the economic impact to power providers, efficiency gains can be a win for manufacturers, utilities, workers, consumers, and the environment. Third, we must integrate more advanced transportation and clean energy into our economy. Whether it is more efficient technology and advanced materials for automobiles, commercial-scale wind turbines, or rail lines, steel is a necessary component for these industries that will drive the 21st century. Last year, the Obama administration set forth the strongest clean car standards in a generation, making conventional technology significantly more efficient and using advanced materials to make our cars stronger, yet lighter, which will make the biggest contributions towards getting the American vehicle fleet to 54.5 miles per gallon over the next 12 years. Over the next decade, an estimated $2.3 trillion will be invested in clean technologies. However, according to Ernst & Young, the U.S. renewable energy investment climate is losing attractiveness, while countries like China and Germany are gaining ground. Existing policy support for clean energy does not provide adequate long-term certainty for the industry to succeed. We must implement long-term policy certainty. Fourth, we must ensure products and components are made in America. Buy America policies reflect where the jobs are, not where the manufacturing companies are headquartered or incorporated. This approach ensures that taxpayer dollars are reinvested in jobs and communities here at home. Fifth, we must continue to support research and development. Manufacturing is responsible for 70% of all private sector research and development spending and 90% of all American patents. The Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Office recently launched the Innovative Manufacturing Initiative. One of the projects selected was a partnership between DOE, ArcelorMittal, U.S. Steel, and others to produce flash iron-making technology, which is a cleaner, coke-free way to produce iron from abundant domestic iron ore concentrates and natural gas, with a 32 to 50% improved energy productivity. We must continue to support R&D such as this, as well as the work being done at the Department of Commerce. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and fellow members of the subcommittee, we truly believe that these 5 measures will go a long way toward helping America and its workers reinvigorate the steel sector, U.S. manufacturing, and the middle class, and move America to a clean economy while ensuring that we continue to address climate change. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our folks here on the panel. Very well done. This now starts our question period where we get to ask you questions and you get to answer. And it's not under oath, but we still expect you to be honest and truthful with us.
It is under oath.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You had to agree to that and sign that. That's right. So most of the discussions really boil down to a few areas that there seems to be consensus among you. And that's the trade policies, energy policies, and then amongst the energy policy is being cleaner, more efficient, and then I'd ask you to add workforce. So I'm going to focus my first round of questions on energy. And probably to Mr. Surma and Mr. Ferriola. I'll start with you, Mr. Ferriola. What is your current worry about energy? What's the one thing in that general field that worries you the most or concerns you the most?
Well, we believe that the best way to get sustainable growth in the economy is through job creation. We need to create more jobs here at home. To do that, we need a reasonably low-priced, affordable, and available energy source. Natural gas is a great answer to that need. Our concern is that we will export that competitive advantage away. We are not saying that you cannot export natural gas. We believe that you need to show concern about both the producer and the user of that natural gas, focus on restoring our manufacturing base here in America first, and at that time, if we have excess gas, then we should export it.
Mr. Surma?
As I mentioned in my remarks, Mr. Chairman, our company is a very large user of natural gas, and we're also the largest pipe producer in providing pipe and other services to natural gas producers. So inside our company, we have the same tension that may be felt across your committee. We believe that a middle-of-the-road approach, cautious approach to natural gas LNG exports would be appropriate, as my distinguished colleague just mentioned. We have to keep a close eye on the supply side. I think it would be important, and we would very much be in favor of a policy, administration, federal policy that encourages continued development of domestic energy sources, natural gas, liquids, and oil, and with pipeline transportation because it's safer and better, as my colleague said, but also uses a lot of steel. A policy which says no exports we think is really outside of what WTO would want anyway. A policy which says unbridled exports are fine, I think causes us supply worries. So we think a process that is cautious, that allows the market to give us some information as these large projects would come on stream, and balances the supply demand so that large users like us aren't at risk. The supply side needs to be encouraged by federal policy that should encourage very high environmental standards. We should make no compromise on that. But I think it can be done safely in an environmentally sustainable way while still providing enormous economic benefits, employment, balance of trade, among other things, to domestic industry. So a favorable energy policy that encourages domestic development and a cautious approach to exports.
Anyone want to add to that testimony? Anyone? All right. In regard to natural gas sustainability, availability, reliability, affordability, do any of you worry about EPA regulations or potential regulations? Mr. Surma.
Yeah, I maybe was not as explicit as I should be. We think regulations that would be designed to impede the continued safe and economically sustainable development of domestic natural gas would be a terrible idea. We think that the domestic natural gas production process has been demonstrated to be safe. They should be held to very high standards. But if one wonders why domestic natural gas is such a success story in the U.S., this is the only place that there are rocks with gas in them. Okay, Argentina, Poland, Wales, China, everywhere. The reason it's successful here is because we have an entrepreneurial culture, capital markets that allow capital to flow to a good use like that, open access pipelines, and a market. And we think that that process of entrepreneurial spirit should be allowed to continue with very high standards. No problem with that, and I think the good companies know how to do that. But we think that the supply side of this is extremely critical if, in fact, the other benefits are intended to flow. We use 130 million MMBTUs of gas per year, and I don't want to have to worry about where it's going to come from, and I'd rather not see it at $10 an M, which is what it was not too long ago.
Yeah, I remember that time. Anybody else want to add on to that? Or Mr. Ferriola? All right. Then I will recognize the gentlelady from Chicago, the ranking chairman, Ms. Schakowsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask Ms. Pena-Lopez, I wanted to begin with this. I feel that the greatest challenge facing humankind on Earth today is climate change, and that it can disrupt nations and their stability and create massive disruptions. Obviously, your coalition has brought together what some see as disparate partners, and I'm just wondering how you've resolved those kinds of issues in your coalition.
Thank you for your question, Ranking Member Schakowsky. So all of our partners are committed to addressing the issue of climate change. Everybody cares and wants, a cleaner, more safer Earth, I guess, if you can call it. And also, everybody embraces the potential opportunities that come from addressing climate change as well. From our perspective, whether in the past when we supported comprehensive climate change, or even now as we're working through the issues of the various EPA regulations on greenhouse gases that are potentially before us, we really just we see this as, again, not just an opportunity to combat climate change, but a real opportunity to create jobs and make our industries and companies more efficient. On the issues that we don't, on the issues that there's differences, and there are quite a few. We really provide a safe table to understand each other's perspectives, but then do not take a position on them in the end if that's where we land.
Your written testimony cited a 2009 McKinsey & Company study that stated that the U.S. can reduce primary energy consumption by 21% by 2020, saving the U.S. $47 billion a year just by unlocking potential for energy efficiency in the industrial sector. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate a bit on a push to accelerate, and then any of the others that would want to contribute to that.
Great. Thank you for your question. We see a lot of opportunity in industrial efficiency. As you know, the Obama administration several months ago put forward an executive order with respect to industrial efficiency and to work towards that. There's also legislation that is about to be introduced. But we've seen great examples, like with ArcelorMittal. There was a Department of Energy AROG grant actually it was a matching grant for $31 million that really led to great savings where they were actually able to generate and regenerate their energy. This, of course, means again, cleaner, more efficient industry,
but if
and also
I could just
stronger.
I wonder if Mr. Rippey would want to comment on that.
The project that Ms. Lopez refers to is our number 7 blast furnace in East Chicago, Indiana. It's the largest blast furnace in North America. Prior to applying for and receiving that grant, and the total amount of the project was $63 million, we were simply flaring the waste gas from that furnace. We were able, in the presence of the grant and installing this equipment, to capture 100% of that waste gas and convert it to electricity, which, of course, can be used to supply homes and every industrial application for electricity that we can imagine. So it's a wonderful example of how industry can and continue and should improve its use of energy resources in this country. I might add that since 1990, the domestic steel industry has reduced its use of CO2 by nearly 30% and its greenhouse gas emissions by 33%. So I think we have a track record in this area of success, and we should continue to challenge ourselves in this area.
And is it true that it saves your company nearly $20 million?
Yes, it did.
A year? Is that?
Per year, yes, that is correct. So it's
a
very good win-win project all the way around, as people define win-win.
Excellent. Did you want to say something, Mr. Cerna? I don't know if you wanted to add.
Just briefly, in our company's case, as I mentioned, we're using natural gas now to inject into our blast furnaces, thereby reducing the amount of coal-based coke that we have to use by significant amounts that financially probably save us on the order of $100 million a year. But the emissions reductions on that are also significant, and we're doing that because it's in our best business interest to do so, and it's entirely consistent with the kind of emissions reductions you would like to see. One of the reasons that our industry has the lowest per unit carbon emissions per ton in the world is because we are also the most recycled material of all time.
Do you mean the U.S. steel industry?
Yes.
You're comparing steel
versus the rest
steel.
of the world.
Okay.
In the U.S., if we have roughly 100 million tons of production, 2/3 of that is from recycled material, scrap metal. It's the highest recycling rate of all time, more than aluminum, glass, plastic ×4, the best recycling system of all time because economics drives it. And that's one of the reasons we're reusing the energy and the labor and the materials over and over again. Almost all the steel that's ever been produced since the 1890s is still in use today. It doesn't go to a landfill. It goes back in the system. So it's a wonderful system that allows us to enjoy economics and emissions levels which are far superior to most of the rest of the world.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to yield back. I just
Thank
have 6
you.
seconds.
Mr. McKinley, Mr. Lance is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. To Mr. Harshman, in your testimony you state that your industry continues to see substantial evidence of unfair trade practices, such as dumping and foreign governmental subsidies to the specialty steel sector. Might you be able to describe with some specificity what these practices are and who are the worst offenders, and what trade enforcement options do you believe are at your disposal?
Sure, thank you. First of all, across all of our alloy systems, we're very diversified, starting with stainless steel and getting into the much higher, more technological, higher barrier to entry of titanium and nickel alloys. But that competition is coming, and it's coming from the same places we see the more commoditized products of stainless
coming
steel.
from Asia?
It's coming from China. It's coming from Korea. It's comes from Russia in terms of titanium. Eventually, longer term, 10, 15 years down the road, it will come from places like India.
And the titanium is found where?
Well, the titanium as an element is the seventh most common element in the Earth's crust, and it starts either with ore or rutile, and it's from that is produced titanium sponge, which is a raw material that we then melt and alloy and produce into the kind of products that that make rotating components in a jet engine. On the dumping side, really where we see it in our business today is more on the more commoditized business of stainless steel. And we can go back and where the U.S. In 2012, where the U.S. economy began to weaken after a reasonable recovery in the first quarter from a very challenging 2011, we saw at the same time as our demand started to decrease, we saw significant or some weakening in the Chinese market from a production standpoint. And we can track when the imports from China began in March and April, really the surge of imports into the U.S. market in that same time period where the Chinese economy started to weaken, significant dumping of product in the U.S. at very low prices, so that today there isn't, looking at just stainless steel, there isn't a stainless company in the world that's profitable. And that has to do with capacity, a large part of the capacity.
What should we do about that?
Well, part of what we're not going to control what happens in the Chinese market, but we can, as a nation, make them live up to their commitments that they made when they were admitted to the WTO.
Yes.
And in addition, look at the manipulation of currency, which has to be viewed as a significant market distorter.
We certainly urge the administration to do that. Is there anything we can do in particular in our responsibilities as the legislative branch?
Keep pushing it. I know there was a bill introduced yesterday that continues to focus on the Chinese as a currency manipulator, not just China, but other nations of the world as well. And we are at a trade war. We are in a trade war today. And it's represented by all of the companies sitting at this table. And longer term, as you get into the more advanced alloys and alloy systems, the capabilities and the technologies that this country has today, the Chinese aspire to, the Indians aspire to, and longer term, the Vietnamese aspire to.
Thank you. Do the other members of the panel agree with what Mr. Harshman has said? Unanimity, let the record show, so rare here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. At this time, we recognize the kind gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, for his questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late to you, but you know the routine that we keep around here. I left the floor a few minutes ago after we passed that continuing resolution that's going to keep the government open now until September 30th. At least we have that behind us. And now I'm preparing to get in my automobile and drive 4 hours to my district. So I apologize for being late. But Mr. Chairman, I thank you for holding today's hearing on the American steel industry. And I just want to say publicly that plate steel is a very important part of my congressional district, and Nucor has a very robust facility there in my district. And while they're providing good steel for the world, they're also providing good jobs for the people that I represent. And so steel is so very important to me. It is clear from today's testimony that we can do more to support domestic steel production. The U.S. is the third largest producer of steel in the entire world, but we rank number 12 in exports. We must develop and support policies that disincentivize foreign steel producers from circumventing existing anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders. And so the gentleman from Nucor, Mr. Ferriola, I appreciate you and all of our other witnesses for being here today. You are the president and CEO of Nucor, and as I said in my opening statement, Nucor is a very large steel producer in my district. Nucor has a tremendous presence in the district and is a great success story for eastern North Carolina and domestic steel production. At their Hertford County facility alone, Nucor's 458 employees produce an astounding 1.6 million tons of steel plates every year. and I have been there, and I have seen it on many occasions, and it's really something to behold. Nucor recently completed a $110 million heat treating facility that now enables them to manufacture steel armor plates for the military, having a direct impact on the safety and security of our forces. As you may know, I've toured the facility and have gotten to know your team very well. They're hardworking and dedicated, and on behalf of Hertford County and all of us in the district, we're happy to have them. And so to the witnesses, I will direct this question to I guess, Mr. Ferriola. I highlighted the $110 million capital development project in one of my counties. When so many businesses are downsizing, laying off employees, or even worse, closing entirely, what motivated you and your company to make such a large capital investment in a rural community? And I might also tell my friends that my district is the 4th poorest district in the United States of America. People don't realize that, but we are right at the bottom. And what motivated you to make this investment?
Our faith and confidence in our team, our workers, and frankly in the American worker. We believe that if we are allowed to have a level playing field, American industry, the American worker, the Nucor teammate will compete very successfully on the world market. So we're not afraid to make these types of investments. We do ask for your help in making sure we get that level playing field so that we have the opportunity to earn the types of return on those investments that we need to continue to provide long-term, sustainable, high-paying jobs for Americans.
And it makes you competitive with anyone in the world. Is that right?
We believe that we are more than competitive with anyone in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you so very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Butterfield. And at this time, Mr. McKinley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got probably 20 minutes of questions to try to get in 5. So I don't think we're going to be able to get through all. But I come from an area that's been markedly affected by the demise of the steel industry, northern panhandle of West Virginia. We used to have 30,000 steel workers in those communities. So you look at that as 90,000, maybe 90,000 citizens that were affected with it, have lost their jobs. So I'm very frustrated with it. This is not, we're not Philadelphia or New York or Chicago or St. Louis. This is America. These little towns that are being affected with it. And we were told over the years, I'm going back just in the 80s, that we had 30,000. We were told that it was the dumping and currency manipulation was much of the fault of the demise of the steel in our valley. I applaud ArcelorMittal for holding on to the tin mill in Weirton, but to drive through that town and see the rest of it all boarded up just takes your breath away. To think of all the hundreds of thousands of people that are hurting as a result of this loss. So my question in part is why? What are you hearing? Why the administration won't cite China as a currency manipulator? Does anyone know why they won't do that? If everyone keeps saying it is currency manipulation, but yet the administration won't cite them.
Yeah, quite frankly, this has been going on for a long time.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, this has been going on for a long time. This is not just within the last 4 or 5 years. So from a this is a national problem, right? This isn't a political issue. I do think that.
So where do
well, the best answer, the only answer I keep hearing is, well, we can't get into a trade war with the Chinese. That will start a trade war, and in actuality,
so we are just expect to have more Weirtons, Martins Ferry, and Bel Air just dry up.
Well, sir, I can't answer that from the standpoint of the administration or the Congress, but I can tell you from the standpoint of a CEO of a large manufacturing company that operates in 18 states in the United States, many of whom were represented on this panel, that this is a war, and this is a trade war, and we can't stand behind the view that we don't want to.
So would we be adding to this trade war if we tried to level the playing field
I don't believe
Let me
so,
finish. If we were to level the playing field by requiring, as part of the determination for fair trade or fairness, to have our competing nations have the same air and water qualities that we have here in America?
I think that is part of the level of the playing field.
And what would happen what would happen to American production if we could cause that to happen, that nations would have to meet our standards so that it is a level playing field? I'm a fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers, so I'm well aware of all the bridges and the repairs that have to be done. I'm very concerned that we're going to continue to lose our position. So what happens then?
I think what happens is that you have a stronger U.S. economy that is growing and providing jobs. That's what happens.
How about, I assume the rest of you would agree with that really would have a dramatic impact. I don't know how realistic it is, but I sure think it ought to be a shot fired across someone's bow. Yes, U.S. Steel?
If I could just add, Mr. McKinley, last week the American Iron and Steel Institute always releases our industry's utilization statistics. Last week our industry ran at about 73 or 4%. Last week China set an all-time record production. So in our country, if we need 120 million tons of steel, we're only producing about 90-some million tons of that. The rest has come from places that don't live here. As a young auditor, Mr. McKinley, my first client was Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel. I've been to Benwood, Beach Bottom, Follinsby, Martins Ferry. I've been there. It's tragic. And if we were running at 85 or 90%, those folks would be at work today.
All right, let me just close in the time frame I have. I don't know whether any of you are aware that there's a potential trade barrier or conflict we're having with Canada right now. That steel pipe. There's in the province of Ontario, the Regional Council of Peel has banned the use of steel pipe in a $500 million water project. Are any of you aware of that they're banning steel pipe? They're replacing it with concrete. And what I want to make sure is that we stop this trade problem early before it becomes contagious and other people pick up on that issue. So any of you could look into that, I'd love to hear back from you.
Thank you
very
Mr.
much.
McKinley. And now Mr. Guthrie from Kentucky.
Mr. Chairman, I was saying appreciate you having this hearing because it's important. My family's in manufacturing. My dad worked for Ford in an aluminum casting facility and now have one that we run after that plant closed. We have one of those, well, it's no longer there, but a place you'd drive by and say, wow, there are a lot of good, hardworking people who made their living there. And it was just tough decision Ford had to make, and they had to make it to stay in business back in the early 80s. Well, my question really, well, first of all, gets to, we're talking about in the environment on the green initiatives. We're a supplier to automotive business before I came here, so I've been in countless manufacturing facilities. And I'm sure everybody up here, because I know the quality of your organizations, have your environmental policy, how you deal with your community, how you deal with your neighbors. And maybe it's different than it was, before I was going around. But everybody, even if you wanted to, which you don't, you couldn't get away with not being a good neighbor anymore. So the initiatives you're talking about, a lot. I think Al Gore said one time, pollution is really inefficiency. But you can't run everything 100% efficient. But everything you get down to that's reasonable is just benefit your business. Is that what you guys are figuring out to do to be more profitable and being good stewards of the environment? And to the point. You may see me sometime around here. If I see an aluminum can in a trash can, I will usually reach in and get it out. Because if it goes into the landfill, it does nothing for us. If it goes back in the stream of commerce, it makes my product cheaper because we buy scrap to form into. So corporate America and manufacturing America are concerned about the environment and have done great strides. And I went to school on the Hudson River, so I know there are issues there that you can't ignore that things have happened in the past. But we're moving forward and working together, and I appreciate that. But there is a concern. I think it was in Mr. Harshman's testimony, written testimony about the EPA mercury source control requirements, and I think you said that would effectively preclude the construction of any new facilities in the U.S. Could you just clarify that? Because we're struggling with that in our area as well.
Yeah, well, from the some of the regulations that are being discussed, as it pertains particularly to the specialty metals industry, more specifically to nickel alloys, the EPA is discussing the significantly lowering the standards for the measurement of mercury, which would be at a level that technology doesn't even enable you to measure. And when you look at the amount of mercury that is a part of the process from a specialty metals industry standpoint, it is negligible. It is at levels that is not contributing to any environmental concern from a scientific fact data standpoint. And the introduction of levels that are below the ability of companies to measure is not, in our view and in the industry's view, the responsible approach to how can we produce and have a viable economy with a safe and responsible environmental compliance. And I think that the businesses in this country, and you're right, we have learned the lesson over the past 40 and 50 years, and the amount of investments that have gone on in the metals and steel-related industries over the past 30 and 40 years, all of which have to be funded by profits and profitable growth. Every investment in the $1.1 billion investment we're making today in our new hot rolling and processing facility in Brackenridge, Pennsylvania, is state-of-the-art control systems with state-of-the-art environmental systems, and advances the state beyond our 60-year-old mill.
We have a coal-fired plant that supports aluminum smelter. The aluminum smelter uses as much electricity as the city of Louisville, and these are maximum achievement standards. That's not measurable. This electric company's got to decide, we're going to invest this kind of money to serve one client, and so there's some real, and these are United Steelworker jobs that pay the kind of wages you're talking about, and this is real. I mean, these are real jobs you can point to that are at risk. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Mr. McKinley.
Thank you. I have one last question with that, and that has to do with the International Trade Commission. When they make a determination that someone is guilty of dumping, it's my understanding that money then, the duties collected are transferred to the Treasury. Why don't they go to the companies that are affected and convert, and by virtue of that extension, to the men and women that have worked in the steel mills that have lost their jobs as a result of it? Can any of you respond to that in the 11 seconds that we have left?
I can do it in just a few seconds. We agree, or at least I agree.
Do everybody agree with Mr. Ferriola's? All right. Mr. Murphy from Pennsylvania, you are recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez, quick question. Isn't it true that the Blue-Green Alliance and your members have opposed the Keystone Pipeline? Yes or no?
We have
Yes,
some members.
yes or no? I believe it's yes. And isn't it a
We have
true?
no position.
Is it true or not?
We have no position on Keystone Pipeline. We have some members who are in support of Keystone and others who are against it.
And is it true that some of your members have been opposed to coal use, coal mining, coal exports, and coal-fired power plants?
Some of our environmental partners, yes.
I'll take that as a yes. Do you have a Buy American policy for the Blue-Green Alliance?
Yes.
Okay. Are you going to be in support of our Currency Reform and Fair Trade Act, 1276? It's going to deal with Chinese and other countries' currency manipulation?
I will be happy to look at it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Surma. Sorry I wasn't here to hear your positive comments, but thank you. You've made a lot of investments in domestic tubular production in recent years. How do those investments relate to the import situation?
As I mentioned in my comments, Congressman Murphy, we invested, among other things, $100 million in a new plant in Lorain, Ohio, just west of Cleveland, because our customers said they were concerned about the availability of certain types of casing for downhole applications and some of the higher-end alloys and finishing that we could provide. $100 million, 100 new people, and we're working there today. That will stay invested for another 25 or 30 years, and that was on the assumption, in good faith, that there would be a level playing field for all of us. Since then, as I mentioned in my testimony, Korean exports up a huge percentage, Vietnam from 0 to 240%, Saudi Arabia up 400%. That's taking away our market, and we've had to lay a few crews off. Most of them are back now, fortunately, but when we make investments, we expect to get a return. We expect a level playing field. What we don't expect is to have those 100 people compete with governments, and we think that's totally unfair. And we encourage you and your colleagues, and I know you do this, to be vigilant in maintaining our trade laws and strident in ensuring their strong enforcement.
Thank you. The Steel Caucus has also led efforts to convince the International Trade Commission of anti-dumping and countervailing duties and positions, et cetera. I wonder if you could say, are you convinced that the ITC is slow to respond, or unconvinced that there's been an injury to domestic steelmakers?
From our company's standpoint, yes, we think the system is terribly organized and terribly slow to respond. We operate in other regions, almost every other region in the world, EU, Brazil, Russia, Canada, anywhere else. They're mostly administrative actions that are taken real time when injury takes place. In our case, we have to prove either injury or threat of injury, which the ITC has, to their convenience, largely defined as a near-death condition. And so several years ago, when we had a trade case against Chinese OCTG imports, we had 10,000 people on layoff, and almost every plant in North America was closed. They found that to be injury, but even that was a close call. My distinguished colleague here reports about a plant that was closed and was found not to be injury. That kind of logic escapes us, and we think the system is such that the injury has to be so severe and so prolonged that it almost makes it too late when relief is actually provided. We would like to see a more accelerated process where injury can be determined earlier so we don't have to go to a near-death experience in order to receive relief.
Or death. Mr. Harshman, thank you also for being here. I want to ask a question about titanium, which is a critical element for jet planes, steel armor plate, et cetera, and that's why it's considered a specialty metal. My understanding is that the Commerce Department is considering a change in the foreign trade zones, which would undermine domestic titanium manufacturing. And one of the conditions of a trade zone is you can't unfairly import foreign goods to resell in America if there's an existing industry or provider here. Can you comment about what would happen if the Foreign Trade Zone Board reversed precedent and allowed foreign-made titanium to be sold into the American commerce?
Well, currently the big non-U.S. Producers of titanium alloys, which are critical for not only commercial aerospace but also for military applications, are VSMPO, which is a large Russian and essentially a state-owned enterprise in Russia, the Japanese, and emerging competitive threat is in China. And if the nature of the titanium industry in the U.S. is really dependent upon the diversification of the markets. It's not only the military spending could not support and sustain a titanium industry in the U.S., even though it's critical to the defense of the United States. So you need a viable commercial base, commercial aerospace, and industrial market. Titanium is used extensively in desal plants throughout the world, for example, in chemical processing plants. And all of that works together to make a viable U.S. industry, of which there's really only 3 producers today in the U.S. And what the change in some of the foreign trade zone laws that would permit the circumvention of the existing dumping duties that are on titanium being imported from those foreign locations into the U.S., if that were allowed to happen, we believe it would significantly weaken and dampen the profitability and the ability for the U.S. titanium industry to grow.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you again for holding this hearing, and to the ranking member as well on behalf of the million-plus people in this country who are affected by steel manufacturing jobs. It's critically important, and it's a wise choice on your part to hold this hearing for you and Ms. Schakowsky. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you say that again? That does conclude our question part, and boy, I'll tell you, it's just what an honor to have the high level of steel industry here in this room today and participating in this. You've been very helpful, and we understand that steel is a foundational piece to our manufacturing in the United States, and we want to be helpful. So with that, let's see, I have a unanimous, well, I guess I'll do the unanimous next. Yep. Thank you. Oh, yes. Also, we all have additional questions that we will not be able to give today, but we will submit those to you in writing. We'll ask you to respond as promptly as you can. And remember, the members that are still left here, that they have 10 working days to submit their questions. And I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a statement of C. Davis Nelson on behalf of the Cold Finished Steel Bar Institute. It has been reviewed by the minority staff as well. So with ask unanimous consent, not hearing any objections, so ordered, it will be submitted and accepted. And at this point, we are finished. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.